Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Women in Conservation Breakfast. My name is Michelle Stook. I'm from Bush Heritage Australia, and today's event is brought to you by Bush Heritage Australia and Trust for Nature. So you may hear a little bit of a din in the background as we're settling close to 500 people into the event space here. We're in Zinc Federation Square in Melbourne. And a big welcome to you wherever you're joining us this morning. So I'm here just to do a little bit of housekeeping, letting you know how this morning's event is going to run. But before we undertake any of those proceedings, I'd just like to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people whose lands we're meeting here today. I'm from Brisbane, which is Yagara and Turrbal country down on the Brisbane River. But we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I'd like to have a big welcome to all of our Aboriginal friends, family, colleagues that are joining us from around the country today. So as I mentioned, there's around 500 people here in the venue, and I think there's equally that many people out there online. So we've got around 15 minutes before the event actually goes live this morning. So just a few little pieces of housekeeping. So we've got Sam online from Trust for Nature. So Sam is going to be moderating all of our chat. So you'll see there the chat function. So please make use of that. You were able to receive an email on Tuesday outlining the proceedings for today and also giving you a list of all of the attendees. So there's a number of organisations that are out there hosting their own breakfast this morning and dialing in and joining us and hearing all of the speakers. So please pop your where you are in the country, what Aboriginal nation you're dialing in from. So please do so today. And I can actually see that chat. If you've got any questions, Sam's there to help us. Please forgive me, I am on the iPad and we'll be able to work through all of that. So some more little bits of housekeeping. We just want to make a mention of some of the organisations that are out there joining us today, and those include the Conservation Ecology Centre in Cape Otway, the Phillip Island National Parks and Taronga Conservation Society in New South Wales. Thank you for everything that you're doing out there. We're also joined by a number of our volunteers from all over the country. So a lot of the work that I do at Bush Heritage was managing all of our volunteer programs. So just in Victoria alone, I know that there's 174,000 individuals that volunteer their time to help conservation and our environment. So that equates to about 1.4 million hours every single year to work towards the goals that we all share. So something that I experience every single year when I'm at this event is the electricness in the air of all of the women in the room, all of the people in the room coming together to look at the work that we're doing. So together in our diversity, in the work, in who we are, where we are, we come together with that same goal. So it's quite a palpable energy in the room, and that's what we're experiencing again out there this morning. So I hope we can portray a little bit of that to you online this morning. I just want to let you know what the proceedings, some of the speakers, how we'll run this morning. So the formalities will kick off around 7:45. Our key speaker is Nicola Toki, who's flown all the way yesterday afternoon, in fact, from New Zealand. So she's the CEO of Forest and Bird New Zealand. So she'll be presenting today. But we have first off our new Trust for Nature CEO, Corinne Prosky. So she's starting at around 8 a.m. We have the Victorian Minister for the Environment, Ingrid Stitt, directly after, and then you'll meet our CEO, Heather Campbell, and then following Heather, of course, you'll meet Nicola, who is our keynote, will also contribute to the Q&A session. So that's where your online chat function will come in. Please put any questions there. Sam, as I said, is moderating, and he'll be able to ensure that the panel receive those questions. During the breaks, we have two breaks. The first one is at 8:15, so the people in the room will get the opportunity to network, to meet each other. I think we have 25 tables or so out there this morning. While they're out there networking, I'll be joined by Vikki Parsley. Vikki Parsley is one of our Aboriginal partnerships managers here at Bush Heritage, and Vikki will be talking about her work, what she does with our organisation. And then our second break is at 9:05, where we'll be joined by Dr. Nicki Munro. Nicki is the Senior Conservation Officer at Trust for Nature. Now, Nicki's actually going to Zoom in, and she'll be giving us a presentation about her work. Now, just because you're dialing in from home doesn't mean you miss out on all of the fun in the space. So you all go into the draw for our Lucky Door prizes. So some amazing prizes this year, and thank you to those that have donated to those. We have a 2-night stay at the DULC Halls Gaps and at the Grampians National Park. I was online last night having a look at this venue. It's absolutely beautiful. So it's a nature retreat cabin, architecturally designed to blend into the bushland environment. So that's one of our prizes. Second prize is a 2-night stay at Ecopia Retreat on Kangaroo Island. Again, amazing. Was looking at that one last night as well. So a fantastic secluded off-grid luxury villa. So thank you both to those organisations for donating those amazing prizes this morning. And the final prize is a day spa package from Endota. So that'll be drawn at the end of the proceedings today. So you'll all have the opportunity to go into that draw. So I just also wanted to let you know that a few more of the formalities. As I said, while all the guests are out there networking, we'll be back in here with our 2 speakers. Please check in the chat just to make sure that our chat is working and the questions are coming in this morning. I ask, firstly, a couple of questions. What do you love most about working in conservation? So please take some time, put your answers in the chat function as you see fit. We'll be able to all see those through this morning while we're waiting online for the proceedings to begin. Another question we have is, why do you think it's important for women to take a leading role in the protection of our natural world? So just some questions to get started, to get a little bit of an icebreaker there and to meet each other. You are actually able to reach out and chat to one another on the chat. So you would have received in your email on Tuesday the list of attendees. So please reach out if there's anyone there you know. Feel free to chat to each other throughout. There's no need to stay online throughout the whole time. You know, go and make a cup of tea. If you need to get the kids to school, please do so. But our proceedings are really well marked and we will stay to time. So, of course, we've got the amazing MC Tanya Ha again this year. So Tanya's been with this event for a few years now. So we've got around about 7 minutes until our proceedings begin. So let's sign off for now, and I'll see you all at 8:15 when we interview Vikki Parsley. But otherwise, please enjoy the first presentations.
Good morning, everybody. How are we today? Are we all well? I just thought I'll interrupt your conversations just for a moment to let you know that we'll be getting underway in a few minutes. So if you'd like to take your seats, we'll start proceeding shortly. So find your seats, fill up a coffee cup with coffee, and we'll be starting soon. Thank you. Can you tell this? I've done this for a few years because I know the specialist equipment don't come to the stage at the start without a glass and some cutlery. Ladies, men and gentlethems, it's my great delight to welcome you and say good morning to the 2023 Celebrating Women in Conservation Breakfast, proudly presented by Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage Australia. My name's Tanya Ha and I'm delighted to be your MC this morning in this fabulous location alongside the Birrong Ma, overlooking our beautiful river that runs through Melbourne. It really is a delight to see you all face to face again, our second year that we've been able to meet in person since going online for COVID, and it really is a wonderful opportunity to celebrate women in conservation in person together. I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians upon whose land this event is taking place. I would also like to pay respect to elders, both past and present, of the Kulin Nation and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians who are here with us today and also those who are joining us online. We recognise that the remarkable Australian environment we strive to conserve is on stolen land. This morning we're gathering to celebrate the important role that women and people who identify as women play in protecting our incredibly beautiful natural world. To begin with, I'd like to introduce Wurundjeri Elder Uncle Tony Garvey to perform a welcome to country.
First of all, thank you very much for that warm welcome, and thank you all for inviting me here today. I think it's a massive step forward for Indigenous people going forward in their own country. I call our people the Wurundjeri Wurrung people, the forgotten people of this country, but not just us, Indigenous people, Australia-wide and also in New Zealand. I'd like to start off with saying Wurminjika. Wurminjika in the Wurundjeri Wurrung language means welcome. So welcome to all Indigenous and non-Indigenous people here today. I'd also just like to say I'm very proud and honoured to be standing tall for my people, which I will always do. I started off with Wurundjeri in 1997 as an 18-year-old. As a cultural heritage officer working under an archaeologist for 30 years, doing digs and ageing sites and permits and stuff like that. So I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. I wear a few hats, as people would know me. I do a lot of meetings with the public as well. I'd just like to say my great-grandfather was the last Nurrungita from Wurundjeri out at Corrandirk on the mission. He took over from King Barak in 1906 when Barak died. He was our fearless leader that took on the government for land rights up and down the Burrarung, which you might know as the Yarra, but we call the Yarra the Burrarung in the Wurrung language. So my great-grandfather took over. His name was Robert Wandon. He led our mob from 1906 to 1926. When the mission was closed due to colonisation and being forced out into white society. I live on the mission today. The mission was given back to us in 1985. I live on the mission with my family today. It's a bit more modernised these days, as you would expect. The Wurundjeri people, they are also a part of the Kulin Nation. So Kulin means man. In the Kulin Nation, we had the 5 language groups. We had the Wadawurrung to the west, the Coorong, who were the westerly neighbours to the Wadawurrung, Tanarong to the northeast, Bunurong to the southwest, and the Wurrung of the Wurundjeri territory that we stand on here today. The Wurundjeri lies within the cities of Melbourne, extend from the mountains of the Great Dividing Range, south of the Yarra River, west to the Werribee River, and east to Mount Bor. The Wurundjeri people, they had a social totem. It's Bunjil the Eagle. Bunjil represented spiritual powers throughout many parts of Australia. Bunjil taught all the laws about life, behaviour and ceremonies to make sure that our culture would continue for all walks of life throughout Australia. So Bunjil was referred to as the creator of mankind. Bunjil created great people from the land. That is why we call the land our mother, or the mother of creation. Never can the land be taken away. The land will always belong to Aboriginal people. as we are part of the land and the land is part of us. Our story is similar to the European people. Theirs is by their chosen faith, ours is by the dream time. We both have creators and beliefs, and ours is Bunjil. It is a traditional custom of the Australian Aboriginal communities to be asked and to give permission for people to enter their lands. And today you'll now join with me to honour the spirits of my ancestors, past, present and merging, who have nurtured this land for over 60,000 years. And we, as the owners of the lands, offer our heartily welcome to the land and hope that together as citizens of this beautiful country, we can build, develop and unite stronger nations for all peoples. I'll close in my Wurrung language, which is Wamidjika, Wandun, Wurundjeri, Balakyim and Kumibik, which means you're most welcome to the lands of the Wurundjeri people. Just before we get that big round of applause that I'm expecting, let's just slow it down a bit. I just want to talk to you about a couple of issues we've got on the table now. And changing the date's a very important thing for us, and we need support from all around Australia. All Indigenous people, we're all on the same page with this one. But we really do need to turn what we call Invasion Day into a sorry day. It's a very sad story what happened on that day. I don't want to go into it too much because it actually breaks me up a bit to see how our people were treated on their homelands. But I will say that on Invasion Day, our people got invaded, and it was only 240 years ago. And they were attacked, basically invaded without weapons. They lost their country. We lost over 500,000 Indigenous people. We are only 3% of our own society now. 30% of them are in jail, white man law. And this is why we've really got to change this day to a sorry day. So if you can get around that for us as Indigenous people, and also all of us going forward as one. We are a multicultural society. I'm not a racist person. I enjoy all cultures, and I think we've all got something to learn off each other. So we need to go forward together and work hard together and make sure we get that date changed so we can celebrate Australia Day all together, and let's all be happy and live in this beautiful country that we're in right now. The government said to me about the treaty, they asked me what I wanted for the treaty. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, the treaty. And I said, but I'm a little bit confused with the treaty. And he's going, well, what's wrong? What do you want me to explain to you? I said, well, you can explain this if you like. I said, why am I asking you for a treaty when you've been here for 240 years? And I said, my family's been here for over 60,000 years and I'm asking you for a treaty? Don't you think that's a little bit backwards? And, they make me laugh, seriously. They live in this false world, they don't think we exist. But I'm here to tell you we do. That's hats in Parliament's probably another one. Just the yes vote. The yes vote's very important for Indigenous people. Look, it's the same sort of thing as what I just spoke about then. Why are we asking the European people, why should they decide whether we have a vote or a say on our own country when our people have been here for 60,000 plus years? The oldest living culture on the earth, and here we are still asking people whether we can have a say. What a joke. I say the world's corrupt, I say Australia's corrupt, and I mean that, and I say that. One more before I get off the floor. I know you're busy, but I hope there's no judges in the room because, I give them a serve the other week. I did a welcome for 60 judges in Melbourne. And I said to them, I said, Australia's corrupt. And they said, what do you mean by that? I said, well, if you can answer the question that I'm about to give you, I said, then we'll have a talk. I said, otherwise it's corrupt. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, all right. Then I said, well, who writes the law? And they said, the government do, the Commonwealth. And I said, yeah, that's right, the Commonwealth write the law. I said, who breaks the law? They said, oh, everyone. I said, yeah, the Commonwealth that wrote the law. I said, because the reason why I say that is, and the reason why I say it's corrupt is, they've got no right to be charging anyone tax Nothing. Rates, nothing. They're living on stolen land and they're making money off stolen country. If anyone wants to know the truth of this country, well, that's the truth. And it only happened 4 generations ago. So I just want to know our people as the traditional owners and respect all Indigenous and European people in this country. So we all want to walk the same line. So thank you very much for having me here today. If we can all just say yes to the yes vote and get us in the door, well, we've got half a chance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Uncle Tony. That was really thought-provoking, and love it that you speak from the heart. So, yes to the yes vote, and I love your vision for an Australia Day that we can all celebrate. So I think, yeah, that's.
No good shooting with a bent barrel.
Yes. For those who didn't hear that, no good shooting with a bent barrel. Very true. Yes, pearls of wisdom. Look, I wanted to, before I jump in, well, no, I'll just jump in. I wanted to make a special mention to, I can see some beautiful faces in the room, but there are also other beautiful faces that aren't in the room. I wanted to make special mention and greeting to, I can see some cameras there, so I'm going to look straight at you and wave. Everyone, turn around, look at the cameras, wave. And say hello to the online guests and groups that are joining us. And there's a number of different satellite events and external events that are streaming the Celebrating Women in Conservation breakfast to their local audiences so that they can join us from their communities and also, have those networking opportunities, without the travel time. And I've heard a rumour that between, say, here and the Surf Coast and the Otways, there's something happening, something to do with aeroplanes. So if you hear some really loud noises, you'll know why. Okay, so this year there are going to be ample networking opportunities. So we'll be serving breakfast on grazing platters during 2 breaks during the morning. So it's a little bit different for those who've been here in past years. Also, if you'd like to stick around after the formalities, which are set to end at 10, there's an optional half hour of networking at the end. Now, you'll see on your tables that there's, I'm already dropping my bits and bobs, there's a little event program. And on the back of the event program, there's a QR code, and everyone knows how to use QR codes these days. Go back 5 years, we didn't, but now we do. I wanted to mention that because you can have a look at the guest list, so you can get a sense of the people that are in the room by looking at the QR code. And that'll just give you a sense of, the kind of people that you have the opportunity to meet this morning. So look, just for some examples of the kind of people who are in the room, and I do this every year, so some people probably get a bit shy and nervous when I start to call out people. Let's start with table 4, Victoria Mackenzie McHarg. Where are you? Give us a wave. Hello. Victoria was our keynote speaker last year. Just a wonderful person. She is from the Women's Environmental Leadership Australia, and so that's the Weller table there at number 4. So give us a hoy, the rest of you at table 4. Oh, yeah, more Weller people too at other tables. Yeah, delighted to have you back and to see you here, and also, delighted to see you promoting women in environmental leadership. I've seen some really wonderful things on Instagram and Twitter in recent weeks, so very exciting. Another group of people that are here today, there are people from Parks Victoria. Where are you, the Parks Victoria people? Yeah. Oh, there was a nice, quiet little Normally I quite like that because normally the people from the government tables are really quite polite and very well behaved, so a little bit of a quiet, that's kind of nice. But look, I always like to recognise the people from parks because at this time of year, your visitation's quite high and you're probably quite exhausted, so, celebrate the work that you do. Who else is here? We have people from Zoos Victoria, I believe. Yes? So if you hear interesting animal noises, then that's probably that. No, just kidding. Congratulations on all your baby elephants too. So very delighted to hear about that. How about our hosts, Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage Australia? Where are they? Combination of well-behaved and celebratory. Good to see. Look, let's get down to some individuals. I've already mentioned Victoria, so good to see you. Alison Rowe, are you here somewhere? Hi, Alison. I'm mentioning Alison because she leads Nature Conservancy Australia, but she used to be at the Australian Energy Foundation, and before that, Fujitsu Australia. So we've got someone with good corporate muscle who's now working in the environmental space. So those partnerships and relationships between conservation, government, non-profits, academia, and the business sector, they're also important. And so that's why I kind of like to pick on / highlight different people from different backgrounds in the room so that you get a sense of, gee, there's a lot of different people here. Another one that I'll mention, my old mate Diana Gibson. Hello, Diana. So Diana is from Fertiliser New Zealand now, is that correct? No. Sorry? BirdLife Australia, yes, guest of Fertiliser New Zealand, doing some work there, yeah, BirdLife Australia. But I actually met Diana when I was on the board of Sustainability Victoria, a state government agency. And there's a saying I've heard, once a wastie, always a wastie. Is that true? So, you know, she and I are the ones that'll be going through the recycling bins at the end of the event, tutting people who put the wrong thing in the wrong bin. But again, you know, that overlap between government and non-profits and different fields of environmental concern is something that is quite important. One more person for now that I'll call out by name, Mickey Perkins, who I've always wanted to meet in person. She's giving me a look. She's an environment journalist at The Age, and a very good journalist, very good writer. And I'm mentioning her because one thing that I noticed, particularly in the science, less so in conservation and environment, but in these fields, when you see people interviewed in the media about a different topic, there was a time when you'd see a white, older male, and it really is important that the people we see in the media reflect the society that they come from. So if you're a woman or identify as a woman, if you come from a multicultural background, if you're an Indigenous Australian, and Mickey sends you an email or gives you a call and wants to know your view on something, don't be shy. Because it really is important that we have that diversity of voices in the media. And I think if there's one audience that will understand the importance of diversity, it's the people who understand biodiversity. So make sure that you have your voice as well. One final group that I'll mention, are there any men in the room here today? Welcome, we're delighted to have you here. I think that, that to have everyone celebrating women in conservation is something that's very important. The Male Champions of Change program has been something that's been quite powerful in men speaking to other men about the importance of gender equity and inclusion and diversity. So, I tip my hat to you. Thank you for being here with us today. Okay, so one other thing that I'll mention is that we also have some great prizes on offer this morning, and I'm pleased to say that every guest, both here at Zinc and those watching online, you've been automatically entered in the draw to win. We will randomly draw our winners at the conclusion of the event, so make sure you stick around until 10 a.m. Now, this year's prizes include a Surrender Spa package at Indota Spa, so very nice. Another prize, a 2-night stay at DULC, or Dulka Nature Retreat Cabins in Halls Gap at the Grampians. So I like the sound of that. I like the sound of all of these, actually. And also a 2-night stay at Ecopia Retreat on Kangaroo Island in South Australia. So a wonderful lot of an absolutely delightful list of potential prizes. Now, I think that's about enough from me. I think it's time that we heard from one of our hosts. It gives me great delight to introduce you from Trust for Nature, Corinne Prosky. Please come here and address us.
Good morning all, and thank you for the welcome. Minister Stitt, my co-host Heather Campbell, Nicola, and the Trust for Nature Board, and you're all across the room, so put your hands up and stand up if you feel like it. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and I have to say, quite a few friends. Welcome. Uncle Tony, thank you for your warm welcome to country, and thank you for sharing this beautiful land with us. Birrong is definitely part of my everyday life and incredibly important. I'd like to also start by acknowledging and paying my respects to the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to acknowledge elders past, present and emerging. And I'm fortunate enough at work to actually work with some of these emerging leaders, and it's completely inspiring. My name is Corinne Prosk, and I'm delighted I don't need my glasses, so... And I'm the relatively new CEO of an organisation that's been around for over half a century, protecting this beautiful land. We are one of Australia's oldest conservation organisations, and we work with private landowners to protect and restore unique landscapes forever. That's our superpower. I recently joined, and I'm already really proud of what I've seen in over 1,800 Victorian landowners, and I know many of you are in this room. The support of the Victorian government, traditional owners, scientists, local communities, archaeologists, volunteers, donors, and the people who hold everything together at our Melbourne headquarters and those who were involved in organising this breakfast, we have managed to protect over 110,000 hectares of land in Victoria. It's the best kept secret. It's the best practice example of authentic connection, true collaboration, and outcomes, positive outcomes for all of us. When I was a young girl, I had an animal thing. I still do. I have 2 dogs now. But I collected frogs, skinks. I had a baby blue-tongued lizard called Felix, budgies and finches. And that was only half of it. My parents had to deal with this because they kept getting lost under the fridge. My dream back then was to become a park ranger. So if I had to go back in time now and speak to my substantially younger self, I would say, just wait and see what will come. And one day you'll land that dream job. And guess what? It's even better than a park ranger. You'll meet passionate people every day, people with deep knowledge, making a difference to our land. You will travel to remote locations. You will hear the elusive stories of the phascogale and the beautiful golden sun moth. And in turn, you know what you have to give back? You'll have to put together corporate plans, lead teams, develop IT systems. But this time you are protecting plants, animals, and habitats and beautiful landscapes. Trust for Nature has entered into a new era, and I am excited to be here at this point in time. I'm also delighted to be here at my first Women in Conservation event. Research and real-life examples show that women possess unique knowledge and experience, particularly at a local level. Their inclusion in decision-making processes is critical to effective climate change. International Women's Day is about pausing, reflecting on equality and how women are represented in our community. This is why we're all here today, to get an understanding of why we need to put gender equality at the centre of environmental solutions, and to hear firsthand from Nicola and the other guests about the benefits of women leaders in conservation. My part of the job is to figure out the how. We must find a way to attract more women in conservation and help them thrive. We need to crack the code and figure out how to weave Western science and traditional cultural practices into the way we manage country in the future. And this needs to implement STEM and empower women. Now, I don't want to hold you from breakfast, and I also know there's quite a few more speakers, but I just want to finish with the words that Mother Nature has never needed her daughters as much as she does now. So please join me today in celebrating the achievements of women currently in conservation, but also those aspiring to join. If you have a look around the room, you will see enormous talent, knowledge and vision. We have the tools to create a nature-positive future. That's our collective superpower. Thank you all.
Thank you, Corinne. So it's your first breakfast with us. First of many. They are so much fun. I think that probably not the only one here who this is one of my favourite events of the year, and even though I have to work, it really is lovely. So you're going to enjoy yourself, even if you have to behave yourself. Now, before I introduce our next honoured speaker, I just wanted to mention that at these kind of events, we don't tell people to turn their phones off. We just ask them to put them on silent, because you'll need them to share pictures and comments on social media. So if you'd like to do that, the hashtag that we're using is CWICB 2023. So that's, an acronym for Celebrating Women in Conservation Breakfast. So CWICB 2023. So do feel free to share your thoughts, observations, the messages, the things that you learned today with an audience beyond the room, because it really is so much a theme of what we're talking about today, is making sure our voices are heard. Now, our next speaker, it's my delight to introduce the Honourable Ingrid Stitt, Minister for Environment. Please welcome the Minister.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everybody. It's really delightful to be with you this morning. Thanks, Tanya, very much for your welcome and outstanding contribution to the ongoing contribution of women and gender diverse people in conservation ahead of International Women's Day. It's really important, I think, to celebrate the work that you've all done and the work that's still to come. Can I also thank Uncle Tony Garvey for that very powerful welcome to country, and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today, and which you're all respectively meeting online, and pay my deep respects to elders past, present and emerging, and of course to acknowledge any First Nations people who are joining us here today. I'd also like to acknowledge Corinne, who we've just heard from the Trust for Nature, and Heather Campbell, the CEO of Bush Heritage, Nicola Toki, who we're going to hear from later, and trustees and board members from the Trust of Nature and Bush Heritage. It's really great to be able to join you at the 12th year of celebrating women in conservation breakfast. And as the relatively new Minister for Environment, I'm really looking forward to continuing the important work that my good friend Lily D'Ambrosio spent many years pursuing in carrying on the protecting and preserving our precious natural environment and continuing to support organisations like Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage in their dedication to caring for nature. And women certainly are at the forefront of the conservation effort, and what struck me in the few months that I've held this portfolio is just how deeply women care about the natural environment. So whether you're working behind the scenes at organisations like Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage, or if you're out in the field volunteering at reserves, supporting conservation through donations, or the landholders who volunteer to protect habitat on their land, women and gender diverse people are making incredible contributions to conservation. And I think in the spirit of calling out individuals, there's been a bit of that already this morning, I'm just going to talk about one of those women, Dr. Barbara Baird, who I believe is with us this morning. So since becoming the Minister, I've been told about Dr. Baird's story, and I'd just like to take a minute to share that with you all this morning. So after years of working as an anaesthetist in Norway, Dr. Baird felt it was time for a change. In 1982, she spotted a very sad for sale sign hanging from the corner of a property in the Meredith State Forest. Surrounded by state forest, it was being used by people as a place to shoot and cut firewood. There was no grass, there were rabbits everywhere, a lot of erosion, and almost every tree had been cut down. But Barbara saw its potential and dedicated herself to restoring it, planting trees and protecting wildlife. And in 1991, the Trust for Nature placed a covenant on this land to ensure her hard work would not be wasted. So this covenant means the conservation values of the land will be protected forever, no matter who may own the land in the future. So Barbara, your love for nature and your property and the native animals that make it their home is an inspiration. It's a property that's teeming now with native plants and animals and has been transformed through love, determination and lots of very hard work. So thank you, Barbara, for that particular effort. The Andrews Labor government is proud to support this work and is committed to land conservation. And we'll hear today from the Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage, who are leaders in this space, and both are led by women, which is fantastic. Trust for Nature has protected, as we've heard, over 110,000 hectares of Victorian habitat for native species in Victoria over the past 50 years, adding over 2,300 hectares in the past year alone by working with over 40 landholders. Bush Heritage owns over 42 reserves covering more than 1.2 million hectares, and through partnerships held, manage over 11 million hectares across Australia. Trust for Nature has also announced the transfer of 2 properties to traditional owners, including the 30,000 hectares Ned's Corner Station on Ninte country, recognising the ongoing stewardship of Aboriginal Victorians on country and the conservation benefits of working alongside traditional owners. The Andrews Labor government is committed to building and maintaining our relationships with traditional owners and to develop a deep understanding of their priorities and aspirations for country. It's an exciting time to be in conservation, with a global agreement in place now to protect 1/3 of our land and seas alongside global climate goals. In Victoria, we've protected 17.6% of the state, meeting the previous international targets, but there's now more we can do to play our part in reaching new, ambitious international goals. And conservation on private land is an essential part of this. Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage's work is so important and has shown that there's a huge potential in protecting habitat for wildlife on private land. Both play a vital role in the conservation of biodiversity in Australia, ensuring that the remaining habitat on private land is protected. I'd also like to acknowledge the landowners who make the extraordinary gift of protecting habitat on their land, some of whom are with us this morning. In 2017, the Andrews Labor government released the Biodiversity 2037 Plan, Victoria's largest ever long-term investment in the environment. Since we came to government in 2014, we've invested over $560 million into biodiversity, and this is the largest investment by a Victorian government ever. We've created 250,000 hectares of biodiversity protection through over 65,000 hectares of new national parks in the Central West, 96,000 hectares of immediate protection areas, and we've protected 90,000 hectares of old growth forest. But we know that we have so much more to do. In September last year, Minister D'Ambrosio announced that Cassinia Environmental will partner with our government to restore a further 20,000 hectares of private land under our $31 million Bush Bank program. That's over 10,000 MCGs to give it some perspective. The groundbreaking program involves the planting of millions of native trees and shrubs to pull carbon from the air and create healthy habitat for Victorian wildlife. A range of threatened species will benefit from the restored habitat. And Bushbank is the most ambitious restoration program in Victoria's history, and its delivery will continue until 2035. The majority of work is taking place on private land through partnerships with private landowners. Partnering with traditional owners, environmental organisations and community members is essential as we strive to protect our natural environment. Before I finish up this morning, I just want to acknowledge that the recent extreme weather events have had a serious and devastating impact on many communities across Victoria, including some still recovering from previous fires, storms and of course the recent floods. The government is committed to supporting that recovery, but I wanted to thank those who've contributed to the recovery efforts, whether that's been on public land, private land, or in relation to our precious wildlife. Congratulations to all the people, particularly the women and gender diverse people in this room, who are making a difference to Victoria's environment, either professionally or personally. I really look forward to working with you to collectively achieve our goals to look after more of Victoria's precious natural environment. Thank you so much for having me along this morning.
Thank you, Minister Stitt. Now, you might have noticed that breakfast is currently being served, and these are grazing platters which are heading to your table now. Do feel free to get up and move around because you don't have to stay at your seat. The idea is to get up and network. Before I let you eat, just one more little thing. This is the obligatory thing that, when you've got the power of being MC, you abuse it, So the obligatory selfie with the audience. Oh. And of course, this particular MC doesn't know what she's doing around technology. Okay, say hello, everyone. Hands in the air. Come on, I think you can do better than that. Excellent. I'm going to tweet that, and I'd like to invite the audience online. Send us photos of your table, your group. Again, the hashtag CWICB2023, so we can all just say hello to each other through the medium of social media. So do feel free to enjoy breakfast, get up and move around, and we'll return with our keynote speaker soon. Enjoy.
Hello and welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed the event so far this morning. So once again, I'm Michelle Stook from Bush Heritage Australia, And I'm joined by my colleague Vikki Parsley from Bush Heritage Australia. Sorry, a little tongue twister there. So Vikki is our Aboriginal Partnerships Manager for Southeast Australia and is based in Batemans Bay. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle.
So we've asked Vikki along this morning. Vikki's experience is diverse, and looks after so much in our patch and doing an array of different things. But we thought we'd just have a bit of a chat this morning about specifically the work that you do in fire. And I know that you are based in Batemans Bay, and of course, in 2019, 2020, the summer of fires. What happened to you? How did you fare in those fires?
First of all, I'd just like to say that I identify as a Yuin Walbunja woman. I'm on my mother's country on the south coast of New South Wales. Grew up in that landscape. My mother was from a very large Aboriginal family. So yes, we had fires that impacted the community in 2019, 2020. At that time, it was, as we refer to in cultural way, as wrong way fire. It was quite devastating for the Aboriginal community on the local south coast to watch the fires go through that landscape. The results, of course, meant that we lost a lot of our biodiversity. The plants, our totemic species and things like that were heavily impacted at that time, and at this point are still trying to go through a recovery process. So through that, my role as the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships Manager with Bush Heritage has seen that I've had some opportunities now to support traditional owners. We have the Aboriginal Partnerships programs at Bush Heritage, which are really important for linking traditional owners back into landscapes, particularly Bush Heritage reserves, but we also work off-reserve in partnership across the country with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander groups. Through the process and my experiences with fire, I was quite passionate in working with traditional owners, and just last year at Takata Hills Reserve in New South Wales, we had the opportunity to engage traditional owners to come out on country. Part of that meant that we could actually have conversations with them on the ground about what were their aspirations for protecting country, for managing the landscapes. In New South Wales, we've been heavily impacted and colonised in previous years, so people have been removed from their landscape, and Bush Heritage have been integral in allowing the opportunity for traditional owners to return. So through my role and coming on board, I was supporting traditional owners to conduct cultural heritage surveys and doing assessments. So that was to identify the specific cultural values and those aspirations that were important. In that landscape, it is Wiradjuri country. So the Wiradjuri people were very passionate about coming back in, accessing a landscape where they had been removed for some years. Through that process, we had one of our elders and leaders from the Wagga community, Uncle James, that came in, conducted a survey, and one of the top points that he actually listed in his recommendations was that he wanted to see a cultural burn take place back on landscape as part of right way fire processes. So through my role, I helped to support and facilitate that with a number of other Bush Heritage staff. We had reserve managers, our healthy landscape manager, fire staff that were involved in helping to support that entire process. We actually ran some training on site as well, and engaged with traditional owners to put them through fire training at that time. And it was just by chance that a couple of weeks later, we actually had right conditions at the time to actually be able to implement and conduct the first burn on country.
What was that like? What was the energy after that experience for everybody? I bet it was quite emotional.
Very emotional. At the same time, it was very pleasing for me to be able to see the response from the Wiradjuri people who were on site. There's another element that takes place, of course, in we're custodians of landscape. So for them, it was about their responsibility being allowed to access country again, coming in to maintain and look after the state and the health of the reserve. And that actually complemented the conservation practices that we're trying to implement as well on the reserve with some of the works that we're doing. So, for example, weed management is one of the high priorities on the reserve there. So by utilising cultural burns, we're actually now having a look at how we can utilise that as a practice, not only in the prevention of wildfires, wrong fire, but also to support the regeneration and regrowth of a healthy landscape. There was also plant inventories conducted previously, so we kind of started to have a look at the overall holistic approach to that. There are wellbeing elements, of course, that are involved with that for traditional owners in being able to reconnect with their landscape. The energy on the day was quite wonderful. It was lovely to see people communicating with each other. There was, that element where people just went in and started to conduct business that they were required to do. And after being removed from that landscape for so long, there was lots of smiles, the energy. We talked about how there were medicinal elements that were released through that fire process too. So, people were breathing in medicine plants while they were walking around as well, conducting that burn. So it was really important to see. And it's an ongoing process that we're going to support at Bush Heritage at this time. I also had the opportunity through this role to visit the States last year.
That's right. I remember you going over there, and that was in November or October, I think. And you met some of the traditional owners of the US.
Yeah, so at that time I'd actually made a request through work that I met with First Nations people. So in California, I had the opportunity to go out onto Yurok tribal lands.
Wow.
And it was really important for me to actually see that we have a lot of similarities on a global scale. We're facing the same issues. First Nations people also reported that they're, trying to navigate government systems, legislation as well. There's barriers and challenges that First Nations people were facing over there, not very dissimilar to what we face and are challenged by here in Australia.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that I'd like to mention is that I was impressed with the women of the Yurok tribe, who are actually the leaders of the cultural burns.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually explained to me that in their practices and their way, the women are the ones who implement and start off the burns with their communities. So we had the opportunity to go out in the field, actually see some of these women.
Oh, wow.
They refer to themselves as squad bosses, which were the head of leading the burn groups. We turned up on the community, actually watched the dynamics of the community talking, the women giving the conversation, leading and saying this group has to go out, these groups are involved with mop up, this one has to go and implement the burns. They're navigating very similar systems to us, where wrong fire actually changes the vegetation systems and the patterns.
They've had so much fire over there over the last few years, haven't they? It's been incredible.
That's exactly right. And it's interesting now too, because carbon conversations are coming to the forefront through these processes. So it's also about managing that as a part of and a response to climate change. So Aboriginal and First Nations knowledge systems have this ability as well to help support the conversations at this point in time. And I know for myself, having experienced fires, those wildfires in 2019, 2020, there's a number of people that have changed mindsets and are coming forward and actually asking, how can Indigenous knowledge systems actually help support us on a wider scale as well? And particularly around asset management and those sorts of areas. I think that there's an opportunity here to collaborate with the Western systems and utilising our cultural burns, which are actually a cool, slower burn that occurs on the landscape. So we actually are starting to see that there's an increase in biodiversity where we actually can implement cultural burns.
That's fantastic.
One of the things I really enjoy about being at cultural burns, and I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but watching snakes and lizards and spiders and all the insect life that can actually escape from a cool burn, whereas wildfires are so intense, they rip through the landscape and they remove that biodiversity. And that's something that I definitely saw on my own country. There was a grieving process that myself and my own community went through at that time, because we had to wait quite a few years to actually see a return of life into those landscapes where food resources. I have to go further now to find medicines in the landscape. Some of the medicinal plants and our bush tucker plants actually didn't cope very well with the hot, intense fires. So cultural burning and this cool burning that we can implement. And, we've got brothers and sisters in the north in Australia that have never been removed from country. There are case studies now developing out of those burns that are occurring in the north that are showing us that, those cool burns are supporting biodiversity. and can definitely make some
Makes such a difference.
positive contributions.
We're starting to get some questions through, so I am mindful of time. If you've got questions that you'd like to ask Vikki, just pop them through on chat. But the first one that's come through, Vikki, is, are you running any programs that elevate women in your area or in your patch?
I'm definitely an advocate for gender equity there. We often find that it has been previously a male-dominated field. So, trying to support women to come in particular, in that space. And, often Aboriginal women in our communities, and women in general, we're the caregivers at home.
Absolutely.
So, there's a few, I suppose, challenges or barriers in the past that has allowed women to participate in that space.
And I guess that's a beautiful segue to our next question, which is, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges in your work?
Some of the biggest challenges, it's definitely trying to navigate and support women to come in and participate in those burns, allowing them access and including them as well, because, in our culture we have men's business, women's business. So, there's that natural responsibility and obligation for women as custodians of country to be able to access country and take care of business. And it may not be appropriate for men to go into those locations all the time. So it's really important to have women involved in that process.
Absolutely. And please pop your questions through. We've got about 2 more minutes, I believe, until we cross back over to the event. But what other sorts of things are you doing in your work? I know fire takes a huge part of your role, but what else do the Bush Heritage Aboriginal partners do?
We also work closely alongside the ecologists and our scientists at work. So part of that means that we have this concept that we refer to as right way conservation, so right way science, and that's the collaboration of Indigenous knowledge systems with Western science frameworks, and it's just to improve the outcomes of what we're trying to deliver. So most of our reserves have conservation values and targets, and I've been saying for quite some time now they're no different from the cultural values and aspirations of traditional owners in that landscape. So we're only improving on that system by working together. So
it's a perfect marriage almost of the two.
Yes, to collaborate and get that message across and improve the outcomes for future generations.
So another question here, how can others help to support improved use of fire in the landscape for conservation?
That's another tricky one because, as I mentioned, we're having to navigate so many bureaucracies and government legislations, but I think with that comes a level of understanding. I know when we led the first cultural burn, I was actually inundated with wider requests from non-Aboriginal people in the community that were aware that it was taking place and obviously wanted to be passionate about coming and participating and supporting groups. So I think just around that, it's being aware of those kind of plans and the aspirations that traditional owners want to take.
So staying engaged with organisations like ours and Trust for Nature. There's so many amazing organisations out there that are doing this work, and there's just so many people now that I know when I started 10 years ago in this sector volunteering for environmental work, it was, it just wasn't a big thing when you look at all the volunteer statistics, whereas now, I know at Bush Heritage we'd get easily 100 applications a week from people saying, what can I do? I want to volunteer. How can I help? So, it was just amazing.
And even I think people being open to helping support resourcing, helping Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islanders to access country again so that we can get in, do those assessments, be the leaders of that in delivering climate change in a positive light, and also working in collaboration with people, further.
And you as a woman, as an Aboriginal woman, what is your favourite part of working in this sector?
I think for me, it's about leaving a bit of a legacy. I have 2 daughters. So it's really important for me to be able to lead that kind of space and be a model for my daughters as well, as an Indigenous leader, and also to be able for them to see that mum's trying to make a difference in this conservation space and these conversations, so that hopefully one day, as part of succession planning, future generations can then pick this up and move forward in a positive light. If we lay a good, strong cultural foundation in place now and collaborate with government systems, then hopefully we can affect some amazing changes.
You cannot be what you cannot see.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've got time for one more question this morning, and it is it's more a comment. So very interesting to hear you share about right way to utilise fires. Some of the wildfires that have occurred in New South Wales in recent year are from lightning strikes. Do you see this as part of the solution, or does it create more problems?
Well, that's certainly an issue to have to address, and sometimes those lightning strikes do create larger fires. But interestingly enough, that's actually one of the tools and ways that our people traditionally learnt. So they would actually observe lightning strikes, see those fire behaviours, and there's certain landscapes that we know seem to generate more of those type of lightning storms. So country was managed around that type of, the elements working with nature. So, people in the past would have gone in and conducted burns in those landscapes to minimise the fuel loads that are sitting in that landscape. And then, of course, that would have meant that it kept lower fires that occurred in long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. As always, it's an absolute pleasure to speak with you. It's been wonderful, and to share this morning with you and everybody else that's out there. So we've got a couple of minutes, so enough time for you to make a cup of tea. So and don't forget, we'll be joined at the next session. We're running about 5 or 10 minutes behind schedule this morning now, so I think it'll probably be around 9:10. We'll probably go live with our next speaker, who is zooming in. So that's Dr. Nicki Munro from Trust for Nature. So I believe Nicki's already online, so we look forward to chatting to you then. But I just wanted to once again say thank you, Vikki. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you, everyone. And please remember to put your little competition entry in, so that at the end of the morning you can see if you're one of the lucky winners for our lucky draw prizes. So thank you. I can hear the ding ding ding. We're heading back in, so we'll see you very, very soon.
I love my specialist equipment. We are about to hear from our keynote speaker. But before I introduce her, I just want to mention that after we hear her presentation, we will have another sort of, second course, networking and nibbling session. And then following that, we will have a separate question and answers. So you will get to ask some questions of Nicola. So do save up those questions for a little bit later this morning, and there'll be an opportunity for people online to send through their questions as well. Now, without much further ado, all the way from across the ditch, as they say, is Nicola Toki. Nicola is a New Zealand conservationist and head of the country's largest conservation organisation, Forest and Bird. Nicola has an impressive history of conservation leadership and advocacy for New Zealand's wildlife and wild places, having worked in a range of jobs across the private and public sector for almost 20 years. Please welcome Nicola.
Okay, how am I going to do this? I don't think I need my glasses either. Tēnā koutou katoa, I rere ana take mihi kia koutou. Kei te harakoa ahau I roto I tēnei whare ki tēnei kaupapa. Ki te mana whenua, tēnā koutou. Ki ngā wāhine toa, tēnā koutou. Rau rangatira mā, tēnā koutou. Ko Nicola Toki tuku ingoa. Toi tū te marae a tāne, toi tū te marae a tangaroa, toi tū te tangata. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Before I continue, I'll just reflect on what I just said in Te Reo Māori, one of Aotearoa New Zealand's 2 official languages. And as an aside, our other official language is New Zealand Sign Language, not English. And hi to all you people out there in the interweb. So it's lovely to be here today. I open this speech by greeting you all in our official language of Te Reo Māori and telling you how happy I am to be here in this room to talk about this important topic. I greeted the original people of this land, mana whenua, people who hold standing, pride and mandate over the land. And this is directed to the traditional custodians of the land, where we stand today, and for those traditional owners, more broadly for Australia and its wild wonders. I greeted the wahine toa. Wahine means woman, toa means staunch. The brave woman, the woman of strength, or warrior woman, and you all know who you are. And I greeted our leaders, the rangatira, the ministers, the chiefs, the leaders, the advocates, the motivators, the drivers of our crucial message about nature. So the tikanga, or the protocol in New Zealand of a mihi or a greeting, is to include a whakatauki, a saying that sums up what you'd like to focus on. And I chose one of my favourites. Toi tu te marae a tāne, toi tu te marae a tangaroa, toi tu te tangata means if the land is well and the sea is well, the people will thrive. And I can't think of a more crucial and poignant way of describing the challenge and the opportunity that we find ourselves facing today. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here to celebrate International Women's Day with this, the 12th annual Women in Conservation Breakfast. I don't know if you've noticed, but Australians and New Zealanders are sometimes a little bit competitive. I am quite jealous we don't do this in New Zealand. I've told Heather and Corinne that I'm going to steal it. And I'll be able to extend the invitation back over the Dutch. So I can't tell you how stoked I was when Megan from Bush Heritage Australia contacted me to ask me to participate in this uniquely Australian, for now, event. So, well, look, my name is Nicola, or Nick, never Nikki, unless you're my father-in-law, who only calls me Nikki. And I'm the Chief Executive of the Royal Forest and Bird Protection Society of New Zealand. Our other name is Te Reo Te Taio, which I think more aptly describes our job. So Te Reo Te Taio means to give nature a voice. So Forest and Bird is the largest and longest serving environmental NGO in New Zealand, and this month we celebrate our 100th birthday. And you know how I've got friends who, when it's their birthday, particularly once you get it like into your 40s, and so they have a birthday week. I've told my team we're having a birthday year. So we'll spend the year celebrating this, giving nature a voice, and it's a real honour to be able to do that in Australia today, in Melbourne today. So, long story short, I promised Megan I'm taking this very seriously, so I've written a speech. Usually I wing it, but I'll probably deviate throughout, and probably someone who is properly keeping tabs on time, Tanya, will have to come and yank me off the stage at some point, or play music loudly or something, turn the microphones off. I did have a speech thought out. Over the last couple of weeks, I've had to change it slightly, and that's because in New Zealand, Cyclone Gabrielle back home has changed everything. So the sheer power of climate change has suddenly whacked us in the face, and right now, thousands of people in my country are displaced. They've lost everything. Some have lost family members. Some have lost every possession they own. Their land has disappeared, and there are still people unaccounted for. The destruction of Cyclone Gabrielle will not be fixed for many years to come. And as climate change impacts tend to do, it has unfairly impacted on some of our poorer communities, and in particular our Māori communities. The point about this is the time for talking is over. It's a real privilege as a leader of a New Zealand environmental NGO to be here amongst contemporaries, friends, family, and of the Australian environmental leaders I see in the room before me this morning, and in particular, I really do want to acknowledge the work of Bush Heritage Australia and Trust for Nature, who I reckon have a really fascinating model of how to protect what I like to call back home as the nature. I'm constantly telling my team to, what are we doing out in the nature? How will we tell people to protect the nature? The way that your organisations, and many of you, because what I see is a lot of collaboration and a lot of connecting the dots, and I've seen it already this morning, working with traditional landowners, working with communities, farmers, individuals, to hang on to as much of the nature as possible, and to demonstrate the resilience that she provides. Given what we've seen in New Zealand in the past month, as climate change whacked us, I think it's clear we're going to need all the resilience she's got. So I've been asked to share a little bit about myself, which will be quite hard because I'm quite shy, but okay. How much time have I got? Also, just as an aside, and I do this, and I think I got this from my mother, so I will just go off on little tangents. I was recently lucky enough to, back in New Zealand, go and see Hugh van Cuylenburg speak, and he does the same thing that I do, and he describes it as he has thoughts circling like planes circling an airport, and every now and then one just comes into land. That's what I do. So you have to blame, and he's from Melbourne, right? So it's his fault. And what I was going to say is, my brother and his family live they live in Melbourne, they live in Lilydale, but they used to live in Ely Beach. And I once tried to buy a cup of coffee at Brisbane Airport on my way to Proserpine. And there was a queue of people building up behind me, and I stood at and the reason I'm telling you this story is just to check you can understand me. Because I stood at the front of this queue, and knowing I had to catch another flight, and it was a very busy little, coffee cart in the airport, and I went to the counter, and I thought I was really clear, right? I wanted a trim flat white. What I think the lovely lady behind the counter heard was a trim flat white. And so we embarked on this 8-minute conversation where I said, look, I really would like it. Please, can I have a trim flat white? And people were lining up behind me and getting kind of grumpy, and she was going, what? And then eventually the light bulb went off, and she went, you mean a skinny latte? So that's just my temperature check to make sure you can understand me. So back to me. I started life as a conservationist at a very early age, and mostly that was kind of camping with my parents. We didn't do much tramping. In New Zealand, everyone loves tramping. I don't, because I don't really like shared accommodation. So anyway, I spent a lot of time watching my nana on her farm in the wildest parts of the southernmost part of the South Island. And she had native bush up the back of the farm, and so did all the neighbours. And when the neighbours decided to bring the bulldozers in and plant hardwoods, she stuck to her guns, and she held on to it. And she taught me a lot about the bush. She taught me how to call a fantail. I think your version is a willy wagtail. That's not a rude word, is it? Okay. Down to her fingers. She taught me how to be warm and engaging to people, but to have a backbone of steel when what you love most is at stake. And I think that's what I see in this room here today, and I imagine what I imagine out there in the interweb. And then growing up, I was lucky. I was lucky to live in some of Aotearoa, New Zealand's most beautiful places as a kid. So my dad, who'd failed school certificate at least twice, mostly because he chose to go surfing instead of sit through the exams, all he wanted to do was be a ski plane pilot and land on glaciers in Aoraki Mount Cook National Park. And that eventually led to him passing his pilot's licenses and my family moving to the national park when I was 7 years old. So the impact of living under the shadow of New Zealand's tallest mountain, Aoraki, meant that nature, whether I knew it or not, was indelibly linked on my soul, or inked on my soul. And I also spent much of my childhood, because after you'd done a couple of years at what the grown-ups called the Rock, which was Mount Cook, you were allowed to move to the bustling metropolis of Twizel, which was sort of, I don't know, a few hundred people in the middle of the Mackenzie Plains, and I had a misspent youth there shooting rabbits on the local airstrip, and that helped me develop my understanding of pest control in this country. So the irony, though, of living amongst New Zealand's tallest mountains and glaciers is that when I was a kid, which was some time ago, not that long ago, there was no lake at the bottom of the Tasman Glacier. And now there is a thriving tourism industry that takes people jet boating among the icebergs in an enormous lake. Indeed, the glacier ice volume in New Zealand has decreased by 38% from 1962 to 2018. And what that means is every year we lose enough water from those glaciers, those things that define, the postcards of our country. We lose enough water to fill 164,000 Olympic swimming pools every year. So that's happened in my lifetime. And the climate and biodiversity crisis is staring us in the face. And our challenge as conservation leaders is to bring people with us to understand and to act. I've held a number of roles. I have a bit of a revolving door. So my most recent job was as a senior leader for the Department of Conservation. In fact, I looked after all the rangers. And prior to that, I worked for Fonterra, working on a conservation partnership with them. I wanted to be a ranger. I've worked for DOC 3 times. I've never been a ranger, which is annoying. I also wanted to be David Attenborough. And what I realised, I might not be David Attenborough, but what I realised was I'm a storyteller, and storytelling is important. And it took me a long time to say I'm a storyteller, but without that, we're not going to bring people with us. So as Chief Executive of Forest and Bird, I have the privilege of standing on the shoulders of giants. That's not hard for me because I'm quite small. And I've taken the role just as our society turns 100, right? So for 100 years, Forest and Bird, or a few of the people that get grumpy at Forest and Bird, you're known as Twig and Tweet. Which is why my Instagram profile is Twig and Tweet Boss. So we've been at the forefront of raising awareness about the nature challenges that we face as a country and then doing stuff, including in our reserves, in partnership with others, and often by our thousands and thousands of volunteers. So it's a real honour to lead this organisation with such a big history at this crucial time in our world as we all stare down the barrel of a biodiversity and a climate crisis coming right up against each other. Which brings me to my personal philosophy about storytelling, right? So that's why we're all here. We're weaving stories of nature into the souls of people so that they act. And in Australia and New Zealand, we have a unique opportunity that relates to our national identity. So, to begin, we all know that Australia and New Zealand have unique species and ecosystems found nowhere else on the planet. So New Zealand can simply be described as the land without teeth. So if it has 4 legs and fur, it doesn't belong in New Zealand. And the litany of introduced pests have devastated our unique and ancient wildlife, including, of course, the fattest parrot in the world, the kakapo. Yes, the one that did the bad thing to the presenter's head on the BBC programme. We have frogs with no tadpoles. We have bats that fold up their wings and burrow through the leaf litter on the forest floor. We have weta, you'd call them king crickets, I think, heavier than a song thrush that could fill the palm of your hand. And of course we have the kiwi, the only bird in the world with nostrils at the end of its beak, with tiny wings, which remind us that once in the deep dark past, it more closely resembled our mental model of a bird, and whose fierce and hard-case nature we've taken on as our national identity across the world. And then there's Australian wildlife, some of the most beautiful and straight-out bonkers nature I've ever seen in my life. So, all joking aside, I've been lucky enough to spend time here and see face-to-face some of the wildlife of Australia. So, during my time, one of the roles I held in DOC for some time was the Threatened Species Ambassador, which was basically similar to your Threatened Species Commissioner, and I travelled here and had some engagement with your previous Commissioner. And that means that I've seen behind the scenes the amazing work of Zoos Victoria, for example, on species such as quolls, tiny pygmy possums, also don't say possums in New Zealand. I saw the work going on out at Healesville around how to look after orange-bellied parakeets, and I even got to cuddle a baby wombat. But probably my favourite experience was joining the scientists working on platypus spot out in the suburbs here in Melbourne, who took us out at night to find platypus. They're very clear with me. It is platypus or platypuses. It is not platypi. And we basically went round and round a whole lot of nets, and it got to after midnight and we'd caught some really interesting freshwater crayfish, or yabbies. We kept catching the same mother duck and her ducklings, and didn't matter how many times we took her out. Next time we came around to the trap, she was back in there. And it got a bit late, and the scientists were very kind and said that, you guys can go back to your hotel and have a sleep. And I said, yeah, but I really, really want to see a platypus. And they said, we'll call you. And so I think just before 5 in the morning, we got the call. I almost went to see a platypus in my pyjamas. And it was an amazing experience. It was also amazing to be a part of citizen science and watch that happening on the ground. And I suppose that's the point, right? We share this duty as citizens of our two countries, remnants of Gondwana, to protect the last of the things that remain here, because they simply don't live anywhere else. And that brings me to national identity and how to bring people with us on this journey. So, because I am a recidivist offender at all of the nature organisations in New Zealand, the last time I was at Forest and Bird, which was 12 years ago, I got hold of this study, and it was by an international market research company, I think called Practica. And what the study showed was that, what their job was they got paid a lot of money to go around and figure out how to sell stuff to people, right? So how to sell, I don't know, Big Pharma or Coca-Cola or cars or whatever. And this particular study was about understanding how citizens of countries identified as citizens of those countries. And so they went around 200 countries, and every country said the things that defined them as citizens of those countries were things like freedom of speech, liberty, democracy, things that obviously here in Australia and back in New Zealand we all take for granted, because in New Zealand the number one defining characteristic of people of New Zealand was connection to nature and connection to the land. Similar in Australia, right? And so when you are a statistician, which I am not, but I imagine some of you are statistician-y type people, if you have real outliers like that, you either try and understand what they mean or you clean your data and get rid of them, right? So, I know you do. That nervous laughter tells me all I need to know. So they decided to have a look about what these, people down here were getting at. And what they found, I'll start with New Zealand, what they found was that even though we, in the last 2 generations in New Zealand, most of us have moved off the land and into the towns, right? And like Australia, we have a very high urbanisation rate. I think it's about 87%. Even though that, New Zealanders described their connection to nature, to the mountains, the bush, and the sea as, quote, ethereal, almost soulful. So for the people of Aotearoa New Zealand, nature is our church. Australia, slightly different. So Australia's connection was very much about survival. I think that's because you live in a landscape where everything can kill you. And so if it's not the box jellyfish, it's the bitey things or the stingy things. But that's powerful, right? And that's why when you see an advertisement for a particular kind of car in New Zealand, you will see it driving along the side of Lake Wakatipu near Queenstown. You'll see the mountains and you'll hear this sort of wah wah, like ethereal music. Because they're tapping into who we think we are. But this is what we need to do. In Australia, it's more like running over things and trying, So our natural world in New Zealand and Australia is uniquely placed to connect people with nature, even though 86% of us live in urban, so that's Australia's, by the way, in urban and suburban environments. So this is a gift. This is a gift that as conservation leaders we must capitalise on. So this is about what it means to be Australian, what it means to be from Aotearoa New Zealand. And so the message is that to chip away at the wild places and the wildlife that belongs here and back home is to chip away at the very notion of who we are. And if we build that story, we're more than halfway there. So I've been asked to talk a little bit about my philosophy, my personal philosophy, and it's pretty easy. It is this. My philosophy is about walking a tightrope of hope with apathy on one side and just utter helplessness on the other, and I'll get to that in a minute. So you will notice that I am wearing a necklace. One of my team thought it was a sparrow. It's not. This is a black robin. So I don't know if you know the story of the black robin in New Zealand, but it is a powerful story of hope. So in the 1980s, when I was a kid, and I was just saying to Diana at the table, I used to collect the wildlife cards out of the Weet-Bix boxes. And one of them was the black robin. At the time, in the 1980s, because cats had basically annihilated their tiny little population in the Chatham Islands, which is hundreds of kilometres off the east coast of New Zealand, the population got down to 5 individuals. Just 5. This is a species like found nowhere else in the world, like nothing else in the world. And of that 5, just 1 was a female. So her name was Old Blue, and she was relatively old, as black robins go. And she was very creatively named for the blue band on her leg. And Old Blue, and I wanted to tell this story because this is the story, particularly for the women and the supporters of women in this room. She saved her species. She didn't do it alone. So she had the support of the rangers and the scientists and the people who never gave up, right? But that is the point, because I don't know about you, but if I came across a species that had 5 individuals and 1 female left, I would probably sit down on the floor and start crying. And the people involved who were in the wildlife service at the time refused to give up. So the first thing that they noticed was that when there was a storm, so she had laid some eggs, her and her mate, who was also creatively known as Old Yellow. Guess what colour band he had. They had a storm, they lost their eggs, they immediately mated, and she laid eggs again. And Don Merton, who was in the wildlife service at the time, went, I know what to do. So she laid the eggs, he took them away. And he gave them, initially, the rangers gave them to another species of bird called a tomtit. And so she laid some more, we gave them away. Laid some more, gave them away, and started building this population. But for a little while, they just built a population of black robins who thought they were tomtits, which was no good when it came to the dating game. So through trial and error, they worked out how to move these things around and eventually tuck the chicks back under the black robins so the black robins could raise the chicks. Now that population stands today at about 200 to 300. They are still in trouble, but they're not out of the woods yet, but they are a lot better off than 1 female and 5 individuals. And so hope means everything, right? Hope drives to action. And what I notice about nature people, naturey people, I can say that because I am one, is we tend to do one of 2 things when we're selling nature, right? We either smack people over the head with how bad everything is, and we say, in fact, one of my team said to me recently, but Nicola, the planet is literally burning and we're all going to die. And I said, well, that might be true, but that's probably not going to get us anywhere. So we tend to, because we work so hard, right? Many of us in this room have dedicated our lives to trying to get people to know the things that we know. And it's frustrating and it's heartbreaking to constantly be dealing with just a level of disengagement that means that we watch things potentially slipping through our fingers. But we're not going to win people over by telling them that everything sucks. So the tightrope of hope is this. If you just tell people how bad everything is, which is why I can't read articles about climate change, because I just feel completely disengaged. What do I do about that? How do I engage with that? I don't know. So I sit in the wardrobe and pull my duvet over my head. Sorry, doona. But the other thing I've seen is we go out and we say, isn't nature nice? Isn't this species cute? I did it. I cuddled a wombat. But how do people engage with that? So the key to any good story, and just by the by, the secret to my success is I am a Star Wars aficionado. And Star Wars is really good at this. So the key to any good story is to let people know there's something at stake. Black robins are in trouble. There's only 5 left, that's quite bad. But if we do this, or even better, and if we do this, this is the difference we can make. Because people will come with you on that journey. So, tightrope of hope, apathy, nature is nice, look how cute this thing is, everything sucks, we're all going to die. So, when we hold that tension, we bring people with us. And it's not easy, right? We have some major problems facing us right now. New Zealand is often held up as a leader in conservation, and that is true to an extent, right? We've nailed offshore protection from pests. Congrats on Macquarie Island, by the way. I was there when the cats had been eradicated, but the rabbits were still there. So it's really nice to hear that they're gone as well. I could have offered my services given my childhood, but... In New Zealand, our entire economy is driven by our natural world. That's a big call, but I 100% am banking that I'm right. So if you are not vested in tourism, if you are not invested in branding the things we sell overseas, everything we do is hinged on people's perception of what New Zealand is. Clean, green New Zealand, 100% pure, but not really. We have the 6th highest emissions per capita. Most of that comes from methane and nitrous oxide from farming, and half of all our emissions come from farming, but we're not ready to say that farming should participate in the responsibilities associated with dealing to climate change yet. That is a major disconnect for New Zealand, and something that's actually not fair on the farming community either. Because sooner or later the reality is going to hit, and every year that we delay is a year we are making it harder for the farmers to be able to adapt and to contribute. Water quality in New Zealand, not flash, and we have created systems that basically mean you can't swim in many of our rivers these days. We love to be number 1, we especially love to be number 1 if Australia is number 2. We have the dubious honour of being the number 1 country for proportion of threatened species per capita. Yay! We have 10% of our wetlands left. In 200 years, we've got rid of 90% of our wetlands. And it is not a political priority, and that is challenging. And one of the things that I do in my role is spend a lot of time trying to convince politicians that investing in nature is the thing that you do in any business, right? You invest in an asset that delivers your return in order to ensure a sustainable income. You don't whittle it down to nothing, cross your fingers and hope for the best. But there is hope. As of the last year, we've had an emissions reduction plan. Forest and Bird was instrumental in writing a chapter, or supporting a chapter on nature-based solutions. We have an adaptation plan, we have a climate emergency budget, we have a thing called Jobs for Nature, we have a new biodiversity strategy, and some key businesses are stepping up. So people are shifting. And every weekend, thousands of people go out and do pest control, planting, restoration, and enjoy and love our plants and animals. And I just want to make a special mention to the youth at this point. I know there are a few youth in the room, and there's particularly a table over there somewhere. Hello. One of the things that is new to Forest and Bird since I've come in is we have a youth we have a youth network. So we have a Kiwi Conservation Club, which takes you up until about 14, and you can get out and play in the nature with your friends and some of our team who will support you. But we didn't have anything for the youth, kind of sort of 16 to 24. And I have just employed 2 of the youth network in Forest and Bird because they're just so inspiring. I thought when I met them, I was going to go in and tell them all off. But actually, they're lovely people, and they have an energy that I seem to remember I might have had back in the distant past. And so, for example, I don't know if you guys are having one today, but in New Zealand we're having a school strike for climate, which the Forest and Bird Youth Network are leading on behalf of Forest and Bird and my team. I've told them their teams are allowed to back out of work early this afternoon so they can go along and support them. And my final point about this, I'm going over time, aren't I, Tanya? Can I keep going? I'm going to. So here's the other thing. one of the things that I think we're really not very good at in conservation land is we're not very good at being fun, right? Conservation is so earnest. And God, we're so boring about it. Like, can we please be fun? And things, words like biodiversity. Like, so I really want to encourage us all to be fun and funny, but if you're not funny, don't be funny. It's not nice. And I've had some examples of that, and I'll just quickly touch on them before I get thrown off. So 8 years ago, when I took on the role of Threatened Species Ambassador for the Department of Conservation, I got a call to appear on national radio, which Radio New Zealand was our big radio station, public radio station, to talk about why we were losing corporate sponsorships. We'd lost a couple. And while I was being interviewed by this man I'd never heard of before, I heard myself say things like, well, the challenge with leveraging synergies, and something, and I realised he was bored, which meant everyone listening must have been bored. I was bored, and I like to think of myself as quite interesting. So, which is why I'm not getting off the stage. So I said, you know what, Jessie? The trouble is this. Everyone wants to sponsor a bloomin' K-bird in New Zealand. Everyone wants to sponsor a kakapo or a kiwi or a kaka. And no one cares about Smeagol the gravel maggot, which was a species I just found out about from the marine scientist the week before, which is a tiny, air-breathing nudibranch that lives in the spaces between the gravel on south coast Wellington beaches, and it's about the size of my fingernail and looks like a bogey. Now, what's really interesting, and I put down the phone and I thought, I've ruined it. And the phone rang and it was this producer, and she said, can you come on every week? So every week for 8 years, I have gone on national radio and talked, and we have a session called Critter of the Week. We have covered everything from dog vomit, slime mould, to dead man's fingers, tree fungus. And people love it. Like, it's become so every year we produce T-shirts and we raise money for conservation, work on the ground. We had bake a critter one year. We had knit a critter, where hundreds and hundreds of people knitted their favourite critter. One woman made a freshwater crayfish hat. And it has really built more of a movement in terms of conservation. So make it fun. It doesn't have to be so earnest. And I want to speak about women's role in this space. So it's not surprising that all over the world, our environment is described as nature, as mother, right? So Mother Earth, Mother Nature. We heard it from Uncle Tony earlier this morning. I've heard it again. Back home in New Zealand, she is known as Papatuanuku, the mother of all life, the mother of Tāne Mahuta, god of the forest, Tangaroa, god of the sea, and all their brothers. So to hurt Papatuanuku is to hurt your mother, and we don't want to do that. And the challenge, I think, is that in conservation, what we've done in New Zealand at least, is we've said nature's something that happens over there. It's over there where people who wear Gore-Tex like to walk around in. And we haven't kind of connected people with nature here, and that we are part of it, right? And so for the women out there who have children, and the dads, for everyone who has children, let them explore their backyards, parks, beaches, and ask what bug is this, usually just before they stick it in their mouth. Just a disclaimer, in New Zealand nothing's poisonous, so it's okay to do that in New Zealand. It might not be okay to do that here. Look, being a woman in conservation is hard. I attended a meeting last year that I was a member of a trust in part of my role, and the chair started talking about the problem with the staff turnover was that ladies kept leaving to have babies. And I have this constant internal monologue going on, and depending on your generation, it's either Reginald Perrin or Ally McBeal, and it was my first meeting, and I heard myself say, don't say anything, it's your first meeting, you don't need to say anything, you know. And then I heard someone, me, blurt out, excuse me, Mr. Chair, and he sort of looked surprised, and I said, as a woman who returned to work when my son was 6 months old because my husband decided to be the caregiver, do you think maybe we should say parents are choosing to have families instead of ladies choosing to have babies. And then they all just looked at me like, why is this lady talking? The other thing that comes up a lot is, emotive. A previous boss of mine told me I was getting emotive. You're damn right I'm emotive. Of course I'm emotive. I'm emotional as hell about what's going on here, and we shouldn't have to put that in a box. I heard Corinne talking about superpowers. That's our superpower. Bloody oath I'm emotive. My son's future's at stake. So use it. Don't hide it. Tanya, at this point in the proceedings, I'll ask how much longer I'm allowed to talk for. Very little. Okay. She did that so beautifully. I can talk about predator-free New Zealand until the cows come home. I'm happy to do that in networking. What I would say is that the gift in New Zealand with predator-free is the four legs and furry things are easy for all of us to come together about. So I don't have the same kind of, we would say raru in Māori, tension with the farming community about predator-free that I do about water, for example, because they want to get rid of the predators as well. And I'm happy to discuss that over the breaks. I will finish by talking about partnering with Māori. So I took the job very deliberately a year ago because I genuinely believe that in New Zealand we're having a conversation with ourselves about who we are as a nation. It's like we just woke up and went, geez, it's not 1955 anymore. And if that's the case, who are we? And what does that mean? And what does the treaty or te tiriti mean in a New Zealand modern context? And so I wanted to be part of that conversation, and I wanted Forest and Bird to be at the table. But to be at the table, we have to represent the people of New Zealand. My son is a direct descendant of Patawane, who, with his brother, Tamati Wakaneni, rallied iwi up north to sign the treaty. The treaty was actually about getting the British subjects to behave, because they weren't, and Māori couldn't control them, so they asked the Queen to try and help them out. The treaty is a challenging space to work in, but it is a very powerful thing. It is enshrined in our law, and it is unique to our country, and it is still evolving in terms of what that means. We have a lot of opportunities to work together as people, and I heard Uncle Tony speak of it earlier. We can only tackle these challenges in front of us by acknowledging our differences and superpowering them to help us achieve positive outcomes for what is looking like a bit of a bleak situation unless we do so. Women in particular have a really important role in Māori society, and in particular women have a role in nurturing relationships, and that's where I think we could all work together. So I will finish with this. My message to you is one of hope and action and fun. Find the light and the humour in these things we're so earnest about, and use that to build people's love of nature into a force for nature. I will finish by using the words of the late Don Merton, who was known across New Zealand as the man who saved the black robin, and he said this: "They are our national monuments. They are our Tower of London, our Arc de Triomphe, our pyramids. We don't have this ancient architecture that we can be proud of and swoon over in wonder, but what we do have is something far, far older than that. No one else has kiwi. No one else has kakapo. They have been around for millions of years, if not thousands of millions of years, and once they're gone forever. And it's up to us to make sure they never die out." Thank you.
Brilliant photo while they're clapping you. That's clever. I have to say, early on today when we were checking pronunciation, Nicola said, I said, "How do I pronounce your surname?" And she said, "Toki, like Toki, I'm Toki." And I went, "Oh, that's good, because I'm Tanya Ha, like laughing." So I think we've demonstrated some nominative determinism, to use one of those words that makes people go, and if it's any in, I think, sort of bringing together the inspiration and the fun. My little thing that I do, you know, you mentioned nudie branks, maybe not Smeagol nudie branks, but every time Met Gala is on in the United States, I tweet photos of nudie branks and just go, with the hashtag, I say, hashtag Met Gala sea slugs. But from an inspiration point of view, like I just feel so inspired by Old Blue. And so I think, you know, but I like the fact that I'm human and that I can do my part to help save my species without having more babies. I'm kind of relieved by that. Now, we are... We are, of course, running behind schedule, so the networking breakfast break that we are now having is going to be somewhat shrunk. It's going to be, we're going to sort of like power move and power eat. So what we have is 5 minutes for the Zinc team here will have grazing plates at the edges of the room. So my suggestion is that you go and get your next course with a little plate and sit at a different place so that you can meet and chat with different people. So grab some food, sit back down, by which time we'll be mic'd up and on these chairs and ready to go to the question and answer section. So up, grab food, sit down, and we'll be back with questions.
While you're out there at home or in the office, pop your questions through to chat. But right now we're being joined by Dr. Nicki Munro, and also, as Tanya has just mentioned, this session is going to have to be a little bit shorter, so apologies for that. But Nicki, I understand that you're there online now and that we are going to throw, there you are, I can see you on screen. Great to see you. And Nicki, I hope you're well where you are in the country, and I'll hand over directly to you now. And apologies that we do have to shrink this session down a little bit shorter, but Nicola was an amazing speaker. But thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you. I trust you can hear me okay. I'm a Nicola as well, and the difference, and small, but the difference being that only my grandmother used to call me Nicola, so I'm a Nicki. But that was wonderful this morning, and I hope you've all grabbed your own cuppas and having your breakfast at home, and we'll have our own little online chat for a short while. I've been asked to give a tiny talk about sort of my time as a woman in conservation, and I'll try to make it interesting. So my own journey wasn't exactly a breeze. For a start, I was a little bush kid thrown into the big city for my undergraduate degree, and I floundered for months. I'd never caught a tram or a train or even used a traffic light. How bad is that? But then I found this old photo of me. So what a country kid. Hopefully you can all see that. I had to carry a Melways directory around with me everywhere in Melbourne for the first couple of months. Who knows what those are like these days? This was a little while ago. So working in the conservation sector is never easy. We're heavily reliant on funding from governments or philanthropy. We generally don't generate our own income in any obvious way, even though a functioning planet underpins our entire existence and has a distinctive effect on our economy. A friend of mine says that footpaths don't make money either, but nobody argues they're not important. I learned pretty early on how much government cycles affect the conservation industry. I graduated from my undergraduate degree just a little while ago at the start of economic rationalism in Victoria, and any hoped for future in the environment was basically stuffed. So this became euphemistically known as being jeffed. Along with 8,000 teachers who lost their jobs, 3,500 nurses, 16,000 public transport workers, there were also many thousands of people working in the environmental industry who lost their jobs. There was no way I was going to get a job in conservation in that climate. So services such as health, education and the environment have always been really hard to justify financially, and sometimes the impacts are not realised until a few decades or years or decades later. And I wonder whether we have the same problems we have now if we'd have the problems that we have now, such as rampant weeds and deer and pigs everywhere, if we hadn't economically rationalised the environmental sector away or jeopardized the environment, as we used to say. I turned around to education, my other great interest. I loved increasing the environmental literacy of young people. I really got a buzz out of that. And I ended up later blending outdoor education with conservation by doing 2 stints as a Green Corps supervisor, first on Phillip Island and second in outback South Australia. At Phillip Island, I learned about restoring fragmented landscapes, restoring, I lost my place, revegetation, weed control, propagating plants. I learned this from my first great mentor, Morag. She was the first to introduce me to restoration, and she pushed the boundaries of what could be achieved, and her re-veg projects were some of the best in the country at the time. In Roxby Downs, in South Australia, I worked at our recovery. Spent keeping out feral cats and foxes and rabbits that we could release bilbies and bettongs and great stick nest rats and shark bay bandicoots. This was restoration at a different level. The vegetation in the outback wasn't fragmented, but rather it suffered broad-scale degradation from overgrazing and feral species. It was amazing to camp out in the reserve while all around you were the critters of the night that were supposed to be there. They scampered and foraged, and a little patch of Australia similar to what it would have been pre-European. I felt like this project was truly making a difference, saving species from extinction and finding ways to secure their long-term survival. At our recovery, I met my second great mentor, Catherine. It was she who established the reserve, and she taught me about finding ways around red tape, to never give up until you can get what you know nature needs. She made things happen that I thought were impossible. She never said can't. She was absolutely tenacious and still is. I went to Canberra to do a PhD in restoration. And again, I was thwarted or jeffed. I had trouble getting a lot of trouble getting a scholarship, despite meeting all the criteria, all my experience and qualifications. I'd been doing research for the previous 4 years, but there were departmental battles going on over my head, and I fell through some cracks that I didn't know were there. But I got a scholarship in the end, and I was up. For me, getting the scholarship was far harder than doing the PhD. That was easy. I learned that sometimes there's other things going on around you that you aren't aware of, and you can't always blame yourself for failures that aren't really yours. So you always need to look at the bigger picture and the context, I reckon. At the time of my PhD, research had focused for years on the effects of fragmentation, but I didn't want to labour over the destruction of our beautiful natural environment. I wanted to look at the positive side, restoration. So I headed back to Gippsland, to the stomping ground of my old friend Morag and the excellent re-veg they were doing there. I studied the biodiversity value of re-veg in agricultural landscapes, particularly comparing top quality re-veg, what I called ecological plantings, comparing them with woodlot plantings and comparing them to remnants as the end goal and paddocks as the starting point. It was a wonderful project with the key findings that you can't recreate remnant bush. Surprise, surprise. But you can create something good and beneficial to native plants and animals. And as predicted, if you do a really good quality planting with lots of species, including like lots of ground cover, and especially if you plant around an existing old tree, then the biodiversity within the planting is much closer to that in remnants, than a woodlot planting. So this was the start of a wave of research across Australia and the world in restoration ecology. Not saying my project started it, but I was there at the start, and it's just boomed since, and that's our greatest focus now. My project did contribute to the changes in the way we do re-veg. We now focus so much more on the understory and plant only tree, and plant only a few trees, not all trees. And we also tend to now look at whole landscapes and not individual patches with linking corridors. It's not a this is habitat and that is not habitat. It's so much more nuanced across the whole landscape now. I then did 2 postdoctoral projects. For one of them, I circled back on my experience at Arabakova. I worked at a new fenced reserve on the edge of Canberra called Mulligan's Flat and researched the digging behaviour of eastern betons and their capacity for shifting soil. We need these little diggers in our environment, but unfortunately they've become functionally extinct. They're totally extinct on mainland Australia, but they've been released in places. But even if they get down to really low numbers, then they become functionally extinct throughout much of their range because of cats and foxes. There may be whole changes to our vegetation because we lost these little ecosystem engineers. I could have continued as an academic. I love research, although I really hated the cutthroat nature of academia and the fight to fund the next project. It was also very demanding on time. If you didn't want to put in 70-hour weeks, there were plenty of others who were prepared to do that in your place. And I chose instead to have a family, the same problem that Nicola spoke of. And I found this incompatible with academia. Many good women are lost from academia because of the difficulty of combining a family with an academic workload. But despite academia being dominated by women, in the conservation field, there were very few senior professors who were women. At one stage, I went around and interviewed all the senior women in my department, all 3 or 4 of them, and interviewed them about how they got to where they were. It was always with help, with persistence, with support. But in most cases, it was a different era that was a little bit less cutthroat. However, there have been a few good changes to help women in academia in recent years. The Australian Research Council, which heavily funds research positions. I'm sorry, I don't know whether I'm still supposed to be talking or not. Maybe I will carry on. Anyway, so I grew up in the bush and have never liked living in cities. I moved to the small country town I'm in now in northeast Victoria, where my kids have a great life and I've done a range of jobs, always in conservation. I've been with Trust for Nature for 5 years now, and sometimes I look at some of my old colleagues in academia and get a twinge of jealousy, but I've had to redefine success. I would prefer to work on the ground with those whose hands are in the soil. There are many paths to take in conservation, and they're all needed, even though sometimes landscape recovery is usually slow and insufficient. We're all making steps in the right direction, and the damage we have caused our environment is done with 1 million cuts. We now need to do 1 million positive actions to right the wrongs. These 1 million actions can take many, many shapes. So I look around at all our beautiful national parks and I tell my kids they exist now because of yesterday's battles. We hold the winds in our hands from previous generations. We can pass on as many of those wins as we can to our children. We can right some of the wrongs and hand our children a better world, but only if we take on the battles now. So here in northeast Victoria, I've planted trees which hopefully grow up to become feed trees for endangered region honeyeaters and swift parrots. I've fenced out grasslands to support threatened golden sun moths. I've learned about cool season burning alongside inspiring traditional owners who just really want access to land to practice their culture. Mostly I've chatted to landholders about projects of their own and on their own land, how to beat back the weeds and encourage native species. With my local land care group, I'm restoring several patches of bush in my local area. And I've also been involved in permaculture and nature connection. As another friend and mentor here says, Jade, she says, I'm keen to see the world a little slower, greener and healthier. Jade is embedded in sustainable food systems and future steading, which is intrinsically tied to conservation. We need to think about conservation in broad terms and make partnerships with people and organisations that didn't seem likely at first. I think that vision of a slower, greener and healthier world is our collective vision, and it will take many of us to work in our small areas to collaborate, whether it's on-ground works or research or policy. Whether it's in the bush, on the farm, or in town, and whether you're looking at spiders in the leaf litter or relearning culture, we need to work together in those on all those million little bites to heal the million cuts. And then from the battles of today, we can create a greener, healthier future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicki. That was really incredible, and what an inspiring career that you've had so far. So thank you so much for presenting today and being inspiring to so many of us out here. Now, I understand that we're about to cross back over to the room, and thank you for your flexibility this morning, everybody that's out there, and of course to you yourself, Nicki. So apologies, we haven't been able to have the Q&A session with you as planned this morning, and apologies to everybody that's out there online, but I understand that we're heading back over to the room. So thank you, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you here in the flesh next year. But otherwise, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you at the end of the Q&A session, but we're heading back over into the room. Thank you, Nicki.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen and gentlemen, we're ready to go. So if you'd like to grab your seats, whoop, dropping my microphone now. If you'd like to grab your seats, then that will help us see who's asking questions. Yep. Okay, now, time to quieten down. There'll be more networking opportunities later. We're also hoping, following a suggestion from the audience, we're also hoping there might be a Melbourne International Comedy Festival show come out of this in the future. So I think that's a great idea. Okay, now it's time to hand over to you because we've got a very intelligent and fun brain here to pick. I could do all of the questions in the question and answer session quite easily, but it's not all about me. So there are two people who have microphones. So if people want to put their hand up, then we will take questions from the audience. So if you have a burning question, pop your hand up and we will, and I can see that there is a hand over there and a microphone headed towards it. And a reminder too for the online audience that there's the ability to send through questions, and that's why I've got an iPad here on my lap. Okay. So our first question over here.
Hi, I'm Sue Bendel from Upper Yarra Landcare. Firstly, I'd like to say to you, thank you for entertaining and informative chat. New Zealand is so lucky to have you as a voice for nature. And since you said you had a relative in Lilydale, and your story of Old Blue resonated with me so much, maybe you'll get the opportunity to visit an exhibition that's starting at the Yarra Ranges Museum in Lilydale tomorrow, where for the first time a little helmeted honeyeater who was known as Green but affectionately known as Super Mum, for obvious reasons because she successfully raised so many fledglings, will be on display at a art exhibition showing our faunal emblems, the helmeted honeyeater and the leadbeater possum. But to my question,
I was thinking I was almost going to have to Tony Jones you and say,
I like the cut of your
jib.
you spoke about restoring nature. I have a view on that, which I don't know if anyone else in this room agrees with. But given the complexities of nature and all her interrelationships, I believe we are still only scratching the surface of understanding ecosystems. So how can we speak of restoring them? Surely what we should be doing is just avoiding clearing any existing patches of nature that still are about. Can you comment on that, please?
Sure, thank you. I got to see the Hamilton Honeyeater the last time I was here, so I do know what you're talking about. And as an aside, art and nature are crucial, by the way, so to the creative people and the artists and the poets and the musicians in the room and the comedians, crucial. So, yes, I agree. How do we restore something when we don't even understand the intricacies of what that means is a big challenge, and I have a really simple approach to this. My approach is to get to instill a love of learning and questioning and understanding and curiosity about nature. And when I was talking to the minister earlier, she reflected on the fact she's also Minister for Early Childhood, and so you have Bush Kinder, I think it's called over here, Bush Kindies in New Zealand. Because people, to quote my actual hero, David Attenborough, people won't care about what they don't know about, right? And once they know about it, they'll love it and they want to protect it. That was a poorly paraphrased quote, but that's the guts of what he said. As to whether or not we should just avoid entirely the harm, well, I couldn't agree more. The challenge is the legislative systems that you operate within, which is why Forest and Bird works at all levels. So we work giving nature a voice at government level, but we're also delivering conservation on the ground so that when I meet with the Prime Minister, I can hand on heart say, as someone who represents people doing it on the ground, I can tell you this. So, yeah, in New Zealand, we fought for decades to stop logging of native forests. That's no longer allowed. I can't speak for what happens in Australia, but I can tell you that capitalising on national identity and building that love is your very first step, and learning more every step of the way. To those young people in the room who want careers in conservation, go and find out as much as you can so that you can help us learn more and then restore.
Now, do we have a question from this side of the room? We've got some hands up, so it's whoever gets the microphone first. I think it's the...
Run, Claire.
Hello, yes, you can hear me? Hello there, lovely to have you here. Alana Johnson, I'm from the Victorian Women's Trust and previously from the Victorian Catchment Management Council. So I'm really interested in your conversation about connection to nature and its role in our national identity. And one of the issues that I've always felt is that for all the great work that's done, we still struggle all the time for the sort of funding that we need to actually make a difference. And from a political point of view, that's not going to happen until there's voter pressure.
Yep.
And to get that, we need people to go to the polling booths with environment stuck on the front of their forehead. So my conversation really is my interest in your conversation is really around that whole thing of how we galvanise people to think environment when they have the power at our voting polls.
I love that question. So, not everybody cares as much about Smeagol the gravel maggot as I do, right? Surprisingly, although, as an aside, people who love nudibranchs really love nudibranchs. It's like a cult.
Met Galaxy's like.
Yeah. So one of the things that in fact, last weekend I was at the Blue Greens Forum, which is the National Party, which I think is equivalent to your Conservative, well, whatever, I can't figure out all the parties. Not the Labour Party, the other one. And both our major parties have demonstrated that a lack of prioritisation of conservation, for example, whereby either the minister or the spokesperson, the minister is currently out of cabinet, even though a third of New Zealand's land is administered as public conservation land. And for the others, the National Party, they have given the portfolio to someone who's just about underground there so far down the list. One of the conversations that I'm trying to have both in public and with the government officials is if you treat nature as an investment, not a cost, then you will guarantee prosperity from a health perspective, from a clean water perspective, from a catchment protection perspective, from a community perspective, not to mention, if, for example, New Zealand somehow moved to bring our public conservation land into the emissions trading scheme, Forrestenberg calculated through a piece of research last year that if we reduced deer and pigs and goats and possums, thanks guys, down to negligible levels, it would contribute 15% of our emissions reductions per annum. So if you are talking to people who don't necessarily focus on the nature but are interested in the financial return, or the reduction in hospital bed nights because mental and physical health has improved. We all know that. The research plays it out every day. Tell that story. So it's about knowing your audience. If you're talking to the bankers, tell the investment story. If you're talking to the kids, tell the story about the bugs, but definitely know your audience and push hard that investment on assets demonstrates a return.
I can't help myself, so I just have to add to that. And just to remind, everyone that democracy does not just happen once every 3 years at a federal level, every 4 years at a state level, whatever the equivalent is in New Zealand, is that you can always write to your local member. Don't let me tell you who to be or how to be, but I often try not to be one of the crazy ones. They take you more seriously if you're not twitching and being too shouty and angry, and if you give positive, practical solutions and also involve them like that. The easy wins of involving people in potentially successful conservation efforts that they've physically planted the trees or that sort of thing. Then that can be quite powerful. And I might just add, 2 years ago, our breakfast that was done online because of COVID. We finished with the Women's Trust Love and Justice song, and it was, thank you for that. I'm checking to see if there's any questions. They haven't popped up online yet, so I will go to hands, microphones on this side of the room. And I think this will be our second last question.
Kia ora, Nick.
Hi,
thanks.
bud.
I can only just
She's
see you.
there
Hi.
behind the lectern.
I'm really interested, and thanks for popping over the ditch to come and talk to us. Really interested, you mentioned Te Tiriti in New Zealand, setting the structure for interacting with Indigenous people. Interested in your perspective or your learnings around, the opportunities to work with Indigenous people that maybe we can learn from here in Australia.
A great question, thank you, and kia ora. What I see happening often in New Zealand is twofold. So yes, we have Te Tiriti, so we have this sort of, foundational document that we can, as a platform for our discussions. What I often see happening is a couple of things, and I've seen it throughout my career. So we either, particularly as what Pākehā, so non-Indigenous New Zealanders, we do one of two things. We either freak out that we're going to sing the song wrong, or say the wrong greeting, or pronounce it wrong, or it's all too hard, and so we completely disengage. We just don't, right? Or we feel so bad about the impacts of colonisation that have occurred for Māori people in New Zealand over the last 200 years. And the stats are the same, right? And we heard Uncle Tony talking about proportion of Indigenous Australians in jail. It's very similar in New Zealand, there's no longer any question that colonisation has destroyed generations of Indigenous people. But we tend to feel bad about it, right? And so because we feel so bad, we don't want to engage because we feel awful. And that doesn't help either. So my kind of response to my team, particularly the teams I've had in the past, is for Māori culture, engaging with people is about engaging at place. right? So go and get to know your local people and get to know them not just in a, I need you to sign a thing or you need me to sign a thing. Like, genuinely get to know with them. In Māori, they call it kaputi politics. Go and have a cup of tea. You know, go down to the equivalent in New Zealand, we have local marae. And because in the end, it's just about relationships. And so you don't have to feel bad. We weren't there when it happened. But we do have the responsibility and the opportunity to get to know each other and work together and not have to know about the baggage and own it, whichever side of the baggage you belong to. But we don't have to let that be the monkey on our back. We can own it and then work together to move forward. So cup of tea politics is my short answer. Yeah.
Excellent, very true. Time for one more question. So we've got a hand there, but I don't know if there's another. So, final question.
Kia ora.
Nicola, Di Marshall from the Victorian National Parks Association. I, like you, am interested in fun and conservation. I'm interested in a memorable time when you had fun, and why was it fun?
Ooh, I haven't had enough wine for that conversation. Or any, just to be clear. Fun. Look, to be quite honest, you know, I've seen hundreds of kiwi, for example, and every time I see one, I get the same feeling. I get the same sense of excitement. I once, because the ranger, who was a woman as well, dared me to, I once ate a weta poo, which, if you're wondering, tastes like a spinach phyllo without the phyllo. I have been bitten by every kind of creature you can imagine. I once...
Is that meant to be fun?
But no, but it's funny.
Novel, okay, funny, okay.
Yeah. Often have fun with kids. Kids like to have fun. I had a slightly, it wasn't fun, but it was funny. I had a very awkward moment once where I was being filmed making this little story about backyard conservation, and I had these like 5-7-year-olds around me, and I was showing them how you make a nature garden, you know, and this is how you make a lizard garden. And I had, I'd been loaned some weta by a friend of mine, right? So they're like king crickets. And I had them in little bamboo tubes, and I shook them out to show the kids. And the males have these really big heads with really big pincy jaws. That's the technical science name. And it got me just right on the inside of my wrist, and it drew blood. And what I didn't want, though, was for the kids to freak out and not like nature. So the kids are going, ah, it's biting you, it's biting you. And I was going, no, it's fine. And all I really wanted to do was go, but I didn't. One of the things that I have done that's fun, in the last year, I've been making a wildlife series for Warner Brothers with a comedian. And pretty much every episode, we just cry laughing at some of the things that we've done. Yeah.
Excellent, can't wait to see that.
Yeah.
I get to watch that in Australia. Look, that's unfortunately all the time we've got time for with questions and answers. We do have the networking for the next half hour, so you know I think you're going to get bombarded. But please join me in thanking our wonderful speaker, Nicola Toki. Now, I'll let Nicola sort of get back to her seat while I invite our next very special person onto the stage to close today's event. And now, Heather Campbell, Bush Heritage CEO, is going to come to the stage for closing events, but I think she needs some music as she walks up. And my suggestion is that we sing her happy birthday. How's this for? How's that? Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Heather. Happy birthday to you. Hip hip, hooray! Hip hip, hooray! Hip hip, hooray! Have a microphone.
Well, that's the best birthday song I've ever had, and it's a shame my daughter's already left. At least she remembered this morning. My son, yeah, not so. How can I possibly compete with that, Nicola? It is so great to have you there. It's so great to have another Kiwi. sorry, I'm a tad biased, in the room, and to have that sense of hope and joy and wonder. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of you. We're all here as partners along that journey of hope and knowing that we can make a difference. To the teams that have been involved with organising it, my Bush Heritage team and the Trust for Nature team, and can you all just wave, because I know you're scattered all amongst the room here. Please come on, all wave. Thank you so, so much. It's just such a joy, this event. But given that we're about fun and stories and joy, I was thinking about those ones that I particularly, have had in my time as CEO of Bush Heritage. And there's just two I'd like to share with you very quickly, because I know we're all wanting to rush back to networking. One of them is about the Plains Wanderer, and you would have seen on the Trust for Nature banner out there, the Plains Wanderer. I don't know why, but my kids have called it the Stoner Bird. I don't know if that's because of the way it looks, but one of the stories I had was from our Bulkamata Reserve, and I have, like any good CEO, I've embellished the story slightly, just a tad. But in 2019, our ecologist Graham rang me out there. He says, "Oh, Heather, we've found Plains Wanderers. We knew they were there." I almost ran over them. So he almost ran over 3 Plains Wanderers, and now he keeps sending me pictures of Plains Wanderers. But this year, we've recorded over 100. And it really is that sense of hope that we can make a difference. The other story of joy I'd like to share is being in the southwest WA and the Fitzsterlings, and we're helping to connect up that landscape and the importance of reconnected landscapes across Australia. And the team were talking about pygmy possums, those cute little possums that sit in the palm of your hand. And I'm going, well, I want a pygmy possum. Typical CEO, I want to see a pygmy possum. So we're going through there. They open up the first next box, nothing, boring. They open up the second one, a whole colony of huntsman spiders come out. Now, that is cool. Then the third one, we got the pygmy possum. So, of course, I was enamoured with the spiders. But that sense of joy when the ecologist puts her hand into the box and then she pulls it out and goes, come on, I want my pygmy possum. And then we look over and there's 2 little babies' heads poking out. So, again, that sense of hope, we can make a difference. So on that note, I know we've still got to draw the prizes, but thank you so much. Keep that sense of hope, that joy, the conversations that we've had today, knowing that working together, working as all people across Australia and New Zealand, working side by side, walking together with the traditional owners of the land that we're on, that we can make a difference. We can go out and see bunjil overhead. We can have those annoying, glorious keas that pull apart your tramping boots. Or the black robins, that we can actually do this together. So thank you so much. We've got prize draws, and then let's just keep talking and networking. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you, Heather. Now, drum roll, prizes. Prize number 1. Yeah, they're very good, aren't they? A Surrender Spa package, including organic relax massage and organic infusion facial at Endota Spa. Congratulations to someone on our online audience, Linda Fulligar, volunteer for Friends of Glenfern Valley Bushlands. Congratulations, Linda. We will find a way to get that to you. Prize number 2, 2 nights accommodation at Dulk Nature Retreat Cabins in Halls Gap at the Grampians. Is Shani Blythe at table 35 here? You can come and grab that from me at the end of proceedings, otherwise I'll look after it. And a big thank you to Janine and Chris at Dulk for their generosity. Prize number 3, 2 nights accommodation at Ecopia Retreat on Kangaroo Island in a secluded off-grid luxury villa. Massive thanks to Yao from Ecopia for this fantastic prize. Congratulations to, from table 10, Hayley Syme. You're the winner of that one. But wait, there's more. Each of the paper daisy centrepieces are also prizes. So if you have a coloured sticker on the back of your place card, then you have also won this beautiful native plant. If it belongs to someone who has already left, then I'll leave you to sort that out amongst yourselves. Now finally, if you have missed out, you have one more chance to win something. Everyone who completes the event feedback survey, which you'll receive later today, you'll go into the draw to win even more prizes. So I'll repeat that just because I know you're all excited about the paper daisies. Everyone who completes the event feedback survey, which you'll receive later today, you'll go into a draw to win more prizes. So that draws the morning's formalities to an end, and we thank everyone for their attendance, both in person here and online. A special thank you again to Nicola for your wonderful presentation. That was so much fun and inspirational as well. And while formalities have concluded, we have till 10:30 for additional networking, so please feel free to stick around and get to know each other over a tea or coffee. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you next year. See you later. Have a great day.
Hello, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this morning as much as we have done down here. And a massive congratulations to Linda, who won our beautiful Endota Spa prize this morning. I also want to thank our speakers, Vikki and Nicki. I hope you enjoyed their time as much as I did. So we just want to wrap up this morning and say thank you for your wonderful, wonderful commitment to this event this year. And we hope that you can join us again in 2024, either here down in our wonderful zinc room at the Fed Square, or again online. And I'm wishing you all a wonderful, happy International Women's Day next Wednesday, the 8th of March. Thanks, everyone. It's goodbye from us. Bye.